All right, Darren, welcome to Psilocybin Says.
Nice. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate the invitation to come and share.
Yeah, man, I've been looking forward to this for quite some time as I've been watching your work. You know, we met briefly in Jamaica, but then kind of following up and watching your work from there. I've been just extremely impressed in your dedication to this work itself, and particularly what you brought out or bringing out here lately in terms of kind of this secret history of psychedelics in Africa. So I think this is a topic that probably a very, very, very small percentage of my listeners, if any, have any exposure to. So just take us right in, my man.
Okay. So, yeah, man, as you know, I have a background in teaching, sharing, educating people about psychedelics, primarily from that African indigenous perspective. But I always highlight that it's global history, it's world history, it's relevant to everybody. As far as our story, humanity's story, and at the same time, wherever you are in the world, wherever you are located, wherever you was conceived and born, this legacy has, kind of like a butterfly effect and synchronizes with those places, whether it's directly through oral traditions or the fact that people are downloading from the same iCloud technologies, as I refer to it, the entheogenic realms, and putting down the same blueprints. So, I share the information that I share, but I inspire people all over the world to really just to tap in to see who they are, where they're from. That starts with you, the land that you come from, the soil that you came from, and then you can follow yourself chronologically, geographically back to source. So that's what I do with my research, man. I just try to take my own research, that's my interest, just going back to source. So I'm born and bred and conceived in the UK. And so I was interested in what was going on here. And most of the information here in the UK is as a myth, so to speak, as, African traditions, when you talk to and speak to the people that are within these circles and communities. For the most part, a lot of the direction and the narrative is coming by way of Central and South America. And all of that is relevant. It's part of world history, world story. But again, just as far as my own personal journey and wanting to learn more about Africa, full stop, being of Caribbean descent by way, of an African lineage, but due to slavery, colonialism, and all of that type of stuff, I've not been able to have a direct link back to that. So I was personally interested in just finding out more about that as a teenager, just learning more. And, I've been on that journey, been on that path to the point where people who inspired me, I've also, become an event organizer. So I've invited them to the UK and says, yo, man, you need to share this with the masses, and that was just geared around African history, African culture, spirituality, and as I personally ventured into the realm of psychedelics, the same questions came up for myself, like, well, I wonder, what was going on in Africa? Were they dealing with psychedelics? Is there, any history, recorded, unrecorded, oral traditions, anything? And when I started to do that research, there was some, fundamental information out there, but I was primarily going to the conferences, and events and stuff in the UK and Europe. And for the most part, there wasn't much information being shared, at all, if anything, about the history and culture. It was mainly to do with Iboga, more specifically Ibogaine, the active ingredient in Iboga. And I was pretty much, the narrative was like, yeah, there's one in Africa that we know of, and it's good for heroin addiction, alcohol recovery, and stuff like that. And I was like, that's really cool, because we have those challenges in the community that I come from. But I'm curious to know, are there heroin addicts in Gabon and the Congo, where this plant is indigenous to? And that was kind of like the beginnings of it all, man. And along with the OG Baba Kalindi EE, who I was a student of, who I was privy to his work in relation to martial arts. He was a master martial artist and taught that for a lifetime. But within the mysteries of martial arts, he revealed the mysteries of martial arts actually come out of the mushroom experience, the psilocybin mushroom. So that, along with the initial research that I was doing, was the catalyst for me to say, no, I'm diving in, because not only did he say martial arts came out of magic mushrooms, it was like, meditation, yoga, swings, roundabouts, traffic lights, the iPhone, all of these things come out of the psychedelic experiences. So that was, interesting to receive that information. But because he looked like me, he spoke my language, not just English, but, just energetically and so forth. I was, that's just how it really started for me, man.
Yeah, I unfortunately never had the opportunity to really sit down with him. I did study his work from afar and was amazed by just what he brought into the community, this integration of martial arts and psychedelics, and yes, this educating us that so much of martial arts and Tai Chi, Qigong, that world coming out of the psychedelic experience. And I think what that highlights in large part, and even like some of the other ancillary stuff that you brought up, is how much of our culture is founded in a psychedelic experience, and that goes unrecognized. Obviously, Africa has been unrecognized for most of its global contributions. The Organization of African Unity, going back to the League of Nations and Haile Selassie and the work that he did to try to unite people and empower people in a time of such need. And I mean, there's just so much more than me, but that is kind of a part of my knowledge base, and part of what really drove me into the work is an attempt to reclaim this indigenous knowledge. So anyway, what have you been finding out about psychedelics in Africa? It can't just be iboga, right? It's got to be so much more.
Correct. That's very much the case. And what I did initially discover is that, there are not heroin addicts in Gabon that are utilizing iboga for heroin addiction.
Go figure.
So that was like the first thing. So, what do they use it for? And between that path and the path that Kalindi opened up for me, where he was pretty much presenting a lot about ancient Egypt, or Kemet better yet. And he was sharing stuff, or I was at least seeing stuff that I had seen hundreds of times, if not thousands of times, images, glyphs, text, stuff that he was making reference to. But within that was hidden the mysteries of the mushroom in particular, as well as the DMT files by way of the acacia trees, bushes and shrubs that the ancient Egyptians, as well as many other groups from the Nile Valley civilization, were dealing with. So those were like the two paths that I, looked into. Primarily was like the indigenous people from Central Africa who introduced, or at least who were introduced to iboga, who discovered iboga, and then later on the various Bantu tribes got a hold of it, the Briti traditions. But all of them stem from the earliest people that we actually know on planet Earth in this current cycle. I refer to them as, Adam and Eve. If we're going from that biblical perspective, that's a question that I ask, who are the first people? Where do they come from? Where are they at? Is it a mystery? Have they disappeared? But no, they haven't. They're still here, living and breathing. So with that, I explored the relationship between these so-called pygmy people, the indigenous people from Central Africa and Western Africa. And in fact, they're actually a global people. You find that these small people are indigenous to all land masses all around the world. But again, that's another subject. But dealing with the African continent, what we're looking at is, a tradition where they say that the iboga was introduced to the people for them to actually be able to communicate with their ancestors. They could, in English, we say it was like the first form of baptism. It was like one of the early Eucharists. It was, a form of Holy Communion, which, many other traditions later on down the line have implemented. And even if you think of the church, they have a very similar ceremony where they have a Eucharist or a sacred element to being allowed, to allow one to communicate with God, which we would call Holy Communion. So there's the small people from Central Africa said this was their Eucharist, this was their, their technology, their plant technology, along with fungi and other plant technologies out there to communicate with the ancestors, the unseen world, the spirit, the elementals. That's primarily what they talk about. That's their narrative.
So I've seen some glyphs of mushrooms coming out of Egypt, but in terms of direct mushroom use and the history of psychedelics used in around Africa, what do we know there around mushrooms in particular?
Well, East, West, North, South have got a record or a history of utilizing fungi, when it comes to the African continent. The earliest glyphs, the earliest images that we see of mushrooms, you find in the North African regions, what we commonly call today the Sahara, which include Mali, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria. That region, you have groups that have recorded on wall in petroglyphs, hieroglyphs, meduneta, call it what you want, but images that show mushrooms in different forms, whether it's, the famous one that people are familiar in the psychedelic communities, like the bee shaman, the one with the image of the big head and the body. And, it's up for debate according to some people whether it is actually mushrooms protruding from the shoulders and the thighs and so forth. But then you have other images where, you've got ones of, these female forms, again, they appear to be dancing or, moving in some kind of movement. And they have these mushroom shaped heads as well. Mm-hmm. And then wherever you see these images, you see a lot of cattle, images of bulls, or this, because in these cultures and traditions, they had, sacred bull and cow cults. And, for those who may not be privy to the fact that, cows produce, the gift, which is the dung, and the dungs then produce a further gift, which is, psilocybin mushrooms. Mm-hmm. So in that set, you've got many cultures that consider the cow and bull sacred because of that gift that they provide. So in ancient Egypt, the bull cults, the cow cults, which would come in the form of Ptah and Hathor or Heteru, these would be the earliest ancient Egyptian pre-dynastic archetypes, deities, gods, for lack of a better term, but in fact, the ancient Egyptians referred to them as Neter or Neteru, which were these forces of nature that actually were mushrooms, and the whole mummification rites, the after death, afterlife rites of passages that the ancient Egyptians curated were all to do with, technology that allows you to have a glimpse of the afterlife prior to dying, so to speak, or just to reinforce that you don't actually die, you transform and move into other places and spaces. And, that's what the mystery system of ancient Egypt was all about. And that was fundamentally geared around mushrooms as well as DMT, which they considered, it was known as the tree of life, and the actual tree itself was the Acacia nilotica, which in the later traditions, it was said this is the tree that the gods emerge from. They emerge from this tree. And that's where we knowledge of, truth, truth, death. It was the tree of life, the tree of knowledge, the tree in which the mysteries of life and death are enclosed. So again, all of this stuff just revolves around fungi and acacia trees, man. That's what ancient Egypt was about.
Right. So
just the northern part. That's just the northern part of Africa. We're not even talking about Eastern Africa, where you've got these pastoral cults, Western Africa amongst the Yoruba, where we have the earliest written records that go back over 9,000 years of psilocybin use. And then you can go down south to, South Africa, where the small people there, the Bushmen, as they're commonly called, or the Khoi or the San, also have records of using Amanita mushrooms, the commonly called
really?
The fly agaric, yeah.
Uh-huh. Who is the culture with the 9,000-year written record?
Okay, that's in Nigeria amongst the Yoruba.
Okay.
Nigeria.
Okay.
So that region is primarily known for its teachings, which we commonly call today voodoo, juju, black magic, all of these practices that became distorted, dark, and loaded with misinformation, actually were rooted once again in, this unseen world, these forces. They refer to them as the Orisha, they're unseen or hidden forces, they're spirits, they're gods. And within the mythologies, the mystery systems of the Yoruba, there's, written records, according to Giorgio Samarini, that, the Yoruba have got the earliest written records. And there's many other scholars that teach and share that type of information.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I was not aware of that. So I'm curious as to your perspective and experience in this idea of the other world. I really have been lately considering how the two worlds of psychedelia, the medical world and the spiritual world, can somehow come together, if they can come together. When I before I ever ate mushrooms, there was something. When I was age 7, I read a book in the library about the use of peyote, and I was like, oh, wow, they use plants to talk to spirits. It just kind of seemed natural to me. And then as I got older and became exposed to the possibility of taking mushrooms, people would talk about taking mushrooms and I would hear about it. And there was this kind of voice in my head that was always saying, mushrooms are how you're going to talk to the spirit world. And that's something that I have not been comfortable talking about until the last year or so. The context of the work that I was doing in Jamaica didn't really provide, I feel like, a safe opportunity to talk about my experience as directly as I would have liked to. And now with the church, it very much does. And I welcome the opportunity to really talk about the experience as we understand it or as we experience it. And it has absolutely become, for me, this is a communication tool for not just our own self, our higher self, our own soul, but our ancestors. So yeah, I'd love to hear kind of what your perspective is on the reality of that, and maybe do you have experience with that as well?
Yeah, well, with that said, I was actually interested in this, that space, that field prior to psychedelics. The lifestyle choices that I make were always complementary to accessing those realms. Like you said, as a child, things like dreams and the dream world for me were a phenomenon that still to this day I can't get my head around. Like just what dreams are. And you can break it down logically, but the fact that people can, can see into the future, have insight from their dreams, get ideas that create things later on down the line, in their lives, or inspire people to, start wars, end wars. All these things come from this kind of unseen, unknown place and space. And so from a child, I was curious about those kind of things. And, as I grew and matured, I learned about different practices, that allow you, if with the right practice disciplines, you can attempt to access these places, and that's meditation, yoga, breath work, in line with all those disciplines. You have different processes or different paths in accessing those spiritual realms. So that's something that I've been interested in as a child. And in all honesty, when I was first introduced to psychedelics, by officially, let's say, because, I was aware of psychedelics, and, the guys I went to school with, primarily young white guys I used to go to school with, they were into this type of stuff. And even then it was like, nah, that's just bad. That's drugs. Leave it alone. And as I matured and got into my own spiritual journey, it was still something that I wouldn't have considered being the path. Psychedelics weren't necessarily the path to be doing that. The school of thought that I was coming from was like, everything you need is inside of you, and, you can utilize, what you have naturally to communicate with God. You don't need anything else to communicate with God or the spirits or the ancestral realm. And little did I know, with further research that, all of the rituals and ceremonies later on down the line that I was learning about, that these indigenous cultures practice and still do to this day, they integrate the plant technologies into that. So yes, you can do it through chanting and dancing and breath work and yoga and meditation. All these practices are, applicable. But at the same time, with the school of thought that Kalindi was presenting, where, the plant technologies were complementary to those disciplines, that they go hand in hand. And that really made sense because, someone like myself who was into dream work, for example, practicing lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences and these type of phenomenons, it can be, or at least for me, it was hit and miss. It was like yoga, meditation. For me, it's like hit and miss. I have good days, not so good days, and I had mainly more not so good days in accessing those places than good days. And then I remember speaking, with people and, at that stage where I was like, well, maybe the plant technology plays that part. Again, the narrative was like, nah, that's cheating. You're fast tracking yourself. And no, you're meant to be disciplined and spend 40 years doing that meditation, or in 5 years in practicing that particular posture. There were these narratives as well. So, it's contradictory at the time. But as I move forward, I realized that, this is what the ancients were dealing with, and various practitioners of these technologies would say that, yoga, if you look at, the ancient Indians, where it suggested it came from, although we could trace it back to Ethiopia and other places in the world, these body practices, refer to it as yoga, but, they had these disciplines. Nonetheless, there was this connection with Soma, which was this kind of mystery brew, this psychedelic brew that, yoga came out of, and it's like, I had teachings about Buddha and Buddha's relationship to mushrooms and stuff like that. So I was like, in all cultures around the world, they're all kind of saying this type of stuff. So for me personally, before I could keep dismissing it, I had to apply it. I had to test it, put it to the test, and then see if it is what they say, and or if it isn't. And then from my very first experiences with, psychedelics, which was Salvia divinorum, then it was DMT, and then later on down the line, mushrooms. All three of them provided that context, man. Like, it put me in those places and spaces where that's where I was, attempting to get or had gotten in the past, but they were very consistent, and there were lessons and teachings that came out of that inspired me to, make it a way of life for myself. It was a lifestyle choice, and there were consistent results.
So can you talk about some of that, like what those experiences were like? I think it's really helpful as I've been talking about my experiences, particularly, as I started to become aware of the reality of this spirit world, which for me, growing up, like you're open and you're a child and there's curiosity and wonder and all these things are a possibility. And particularly if you're in the Catholic Church where they got saints and angels and all that stuff. So you just kind of, at least for me, I just was like, okay, this is a reality. And then at a certain point, this rational mind wants to take over and everything is, materialism and what you see, or it's not there. And so it's taken a deprogramming of my mind to be able to acknowledge, accept, and encounter. And so, I feel like it's valuable as I've shared my experiences with others, particularly how psychedelics moved beyond the psychological realm and into the spiritual realm, has given a sense of identity and a sense of context for others to understand their experiences with a little more depth. So I'd love to hear kind of like what that was like for you as you began to consciously enter into that world and engage with it.
So, without going into too much detail, because I don't like to go into too much detail, because I do understand as well with the sharing and exchange, there's definitely growth and development, on it for everybody. But I'm also aware that it can kind of distort people's perception as well as expectation when they step into these spaces. So, this is what happened with Eric, this is what happened with Darren, this is what happened with Lee. They're going into it expecting these things to happen. And now one is unique and have these kind of bespoke experiences,
right.
And there's a process, for everybody and, learning. So I went through a process.
Yes. And to be fair, I think the same thing comes out of the clinical trials as well, right? People, okay, this is what Johns Hopkins says happens. This is what Michael Pollan says happens. And so they come to the experience and then they're like, well, how come I didn't get the thing that I was supposed to get? So I have found a big part of my work is always trying to help people bring their experience back to their experience, not what anybody else had.
You got it. That's really important. But at the same time, I understand sharing how it helps and supports. So, with that said, I had initial experiences, not even the first experiences, man, put me into places and spaces, where I could say there were beings, intelligences that I could interact with and engage with. For the most part, at the early stages, it was just like sitting and looking and observing, from the inner world with eyes closed to open my eyes and there's things in the room, just exactly where I'm sitting right now. It's like, wow, there's things floating through the room and you can interface and interact with these forms. And, and sometimes they appear to be physical forms. And other times, were more like light or they were unseen, but you could feel presences, and, as those experiences you kind of manifest, I manifested, I became, what I could say, more intent, more comfortable, less scared, less fearful of taking those dosages that will put you into those spaces. So me personally, I identified certain characters, archetypes, gods or beings that were consistent in my salvia experience, that were consistent in my DMT experiences or within my mushroom experiences. Like there's certain things that kept on appearing and there was other things that I've seen once and I've never seen them again, and those things that were consistent, I felt like, well, maybe that's my opportunity to build a relationship, understand what I'm experiencing, what this thing is and what it has to offer. And that's kind of how it started. And my curiosity just started to build relationships where just like, anything, I built a framework around it, and I understood what I needed to do. Again, it's still hit and miss. It's not, I could try it on a Friday night and try and hook up with the bee shaman, from Tunisia. It's necessarily going to work. I could spend the whole night in the corner just shaking,
Yes, I do know what you're saying.
So like, it doesn't mean like, every time you pick up the phone, you get a direct call and a direct answer, and it's just like through trial and error, like anything in life, man, just like anything in life, it was just like takes consistency, practice, discipline, and I'm still on that journey, on that path. And then I've also had experiences where, I've interacted with at least in my experience, people that are in the here and now, like I have conversations with, people that are alive right now, but in those realms, in those realms, and they teach and share perspectives of our relationship, in the here and now. And that could be like with siblings, brothers and sisters, good friends, teachers. And then on the moving further, I've also had experiences where people who are no longer here physically, with what we would call have died, have made the transition, they come up in the experience. And I wouldn't say it's no different, but very similar to like dream-like experiences where once you come out of it, well, what are you going to do with that? Is it just a dream? Is it just a trip? Or is it real to you? How do you apply or integrate those exchanges that you had? And those are things that I'm still working on developing now, and, filtering out what is the BS, what is my own BS, and what is what we could call divine or holy, and what is just part of the experience. And I guess many people who step into these spaces have that. And, and to some people, it's like the life-changing experiences that you have. And for some people, it's the bad trips, as they refer to it, someone's bad trip is like, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yes, I totally get it.
So it's like swings and roundabouts, and that's why I say it's very personal, it's intimate, it's it spoke to you. I know many people are into different forms of divination, like tarot, different forms of card reading, carry show readings, and so forth, that may be done by somebody on your behalf, or you might even do on your own behalf. But I've always said, since having the psychedelic experiences, that it's been the most personal divination I've ever had. And I don't know if anything else, any card reading, tarot reading, hypnosis, therapy, or whatever else is, provided in accessing this kind of knowledge from the other side. Nothing like psychedelics has been able to do that for me. So I became an advocate for that. And that's where I started in this experience. In my journey, it wasn't about that clinical stuff. That was just what I was hearing through the grapevine. But the people who I was dealing with it directly were like, we deal with this to, navigate our psyche, to go within ourselves, to check out those unseen, hyperdimensional, multi-universal places and spaces. And yes, it can be used as medicine. It can be used for healing, but that's not the be all and end all. So that was how I started to engage with it from the gate. It was like, that's what it's here for.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's like the depression relief and the relief from addiction and all that just kind of seems like some of the lowest hanging fruit that these experiences have to offer. I'll never forget this guy working with. He came in for crippling depression, and he had a couple of really powerful experiences, and then on the third experience he had this ancestor god entity, the full-blown thing, and he came out of it, and I remember he took off his eye shades, and he's like, no shit, this stuff cures depression. I just talked to God for 4 hours, so like the mental health benefits I really see as an outcome of the spiritual benefit, which is like what you just touched on, something that we have such a very, very rudimentary framework for, is relationships with these intelligences. And I'm not afraid to talk about this. I was, and I think it's really important, really valuable to talk about. There are scientists who are out there studying. Even Rick Strassman, the founder of the DMT research, has been, actively questioning the consistency of these entities and how come different people are meeting the same entities. And here we are now, as we start to get a better understanding through technology of the invisible world, and physics is understanding more and more gravity and all these forces that have such a huge impact on our everyday life. It seems like psychedelics are going to be a tool that help us gain a better working knowledge of this world behind our world. So, this idea of developing relationships is something that has been kind of growing in my experience, particularly with deceased loved ones. But can you talk a little bit more about, and I really appreciate how you're able to speak in generalities, but also it's very obvious that you have a wealth of experience that is that's informing this. So, like, just in general terms, for me, can you share with me how that has evolved, this kind of working relationship with intelligences? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so just again, like I've come from a school of thought where I've learned that I've got to create my own framework, religion's framework, for example, or even other spiritual paths that I've applied in my life. There's a framework, and I've learned that over the years, if I pull from those frameworks, but primarily the framework that I create, it allows me to be consistent in my processes. So with that said, if to be specific, I've had two key figures in my life just over 2 years ago make the transition. One of them being Kalindi EE, and the other one being my father, my biological father. Both made the transition 9 days apart. So in my practices, there's a way that I go about engaging my ancestors or acknowledging them with or without psychedelics, and some refer to that as maybe like an altar space, a sacred space. So, it's like setting up a sacred space, being deliberate, being intent with what I want to do. And I see my altar space as like an antenna, a satellite. It's my interface. It's my arcade machine. It's where I'm going to interface with to access those people, those places and spaces. And like I said, it's not always consistent, but knowing that I've got certain imagery, certain symbols, certain things that are relevant to me or my experience, my relationship with those people. It could be things that I know they ate, things that I know they drank, things that I know they were interested in life, their favorite movie, whatever it is that I'm trying to, build or remember about, my relationship with them. That in itself for me would be the first stage, as well as, preparing the space, preparing myself, preparing that sacred space to engage with particular people, particular beings, particular archetypes, So I decorate it in a way, what we could call, for me, so it's like, for me, it's a form of like biohacking, neurohacking, like just kind of, I see psychedelics, it's all about going in. So I'm just kind of preparing myself, I'm hypnotizing myself, I'm pimping myself, I use all these terminologies as a way to, start reinforcing what am I trying to do and setting that intention. And then, according to, what technologies I'm working with, they would also maybe be placed on the altar, over a period of time, charging them up with, mental technology, the same technology that we believe in, that we're utilizing right now. I know that there's organic versions of them,
Yes.
We call it our intuition, our telepathic communication, these types of forms. So whether you believe it or not, as I say, it's like I don't need anybody to reaffirm that or confirm that for me on my behalf, whether what I'm doing just looks like a bag of rubbish, like what you doing? It's what Darren needs to do. It's what Darren does himself to hype him up, to psych him up, to get my psyche in a certain place and space. And then with the external world reflecting what was going on in my mind, it allows me to have a more deliberate, direct experience with whoever that may be. And I'm saying that to say that I've done that with my father, I've done that with Kalindi, and I've done that with, musicians that I like, like rappers that I've grown up listening to that are no longer here, that have appeared in dreams of, just in my subconscious. There's certain synchronicities that happen in life. And Darren may feel like, wow, that energy is trying to show me something. Next time I go in, let's invite that energy to be a part of the experience. And sometimes I'll get pulled into other beings, other ancestors' experiences, and that's not necessarily or was the intention that I went in to do. So this is kind of how Darren plays around with it.
I love that. Yeah, the intentionality, the deliberate kind of setting it up. I just love how you're describing all this as kind of mirroring the outside, mirroring into the inside. This landscape almost, right? Sounds like. So what about this? I guess what I want to ask is, we have these traditions that seem to have arisen out of the psychedelic experience. And then within those traditions, the psychedelic experience is seen as now a shortcut or a cheat code. And it's often undervalued and diminished by practitioners in these worlds. I mean, I'm right here behind me. I got the Neijing 2. It's a Taoist metaphor of the human system. And I study quite a bit of pretty old Taoist philosophy. And even within those 2,000 and 3,000 year old philosophies, psychedelics are spoken of as a poison. I've heard one incredible, very wise teacher, Mantak Chia, who I follow his work and love almost everything that he does, because he helped me understand my psychedelic experiences. But he claims that even psilocybin and DMT are poisons and that they are taking you to the edge of actual death. And that's what induces these experiences. And we know that's not true. So how did it get so confused where even these well-practiced masters of high-level martial arts don't understand their own history?
Yeah, it's multiple fold. Yeah, it's a multiple fold of reasons as to that's an assumption as well as things I'm aware of. For the most part, there's been a hierarchy, a system put in place that has put a taboo on these things. If we're talking about the here and now, like right here, right now, so you just say magic mushrooms, you say these things, and there's key words that come along with that. Drugs being the first, poison, deadly, all of that type of stuff. But then you can go back even further, and these are some of the associations associated with it when you're looking at like religion. So if we look at like what the government is saying right now, then you've got that kind of religious perspective. And if we be frank, be straight, these powers that be in the here and now were not necessarily set up to support the masses. They've always been fraternal. They've always been secret in the sense of what they give to the masses prior to what was being taught really in the temples, in the synagogues, in the mosque, in the churches, or just in the meeting rooms, amongst these fraternities and stuff. So there's I have an understanding, and many people do, that behind each, even if you just look at the religions, for example, the various practices, the three mainstream religions, behind all of those, outside of what they give the masses, there's like a mystery system. Amongst Christianity, it's known as the Gnostics, the Gnosis. If you dive into that, and then, in Islam, you have, for example, Sufism, and you have many other traditions that are like the hidden mystery part of the physical religion that we're given, as well as Judaism, and the Kabbalah and the Kabbalists and those different teachings. And then within those, you'll find out the reason why the masses don't know is because, one, it's all part of the secret societies. It's all part of the secret. So, and, part of the secret, if you've got a secret and you're being asked all the time and you can't tell the secret, one way is to create a narrative that we all agree on. This is what we're going to tell the masses. One of those that they've agreed on is that it's bad. It don't go there. I thought we've got to make sure we tell people. And as you get deep into the mysteries, you're going to find out that the very same thing you was telling me to stay away from is actually the thing that this thing is coming out of, and I need to be engaged in. And according to all of those traditions, like people are doing research right now. Christianity, I speak about it a lot because, that's the religion or the framework that, they brought into Africa, brought into the Caribbean and utilized amongst, the people that I come from, by way of Africa and the Caribbean, Christianity and the Roman Catholic traditions. So that's the spell, that's the framework that's over the minds of the masses. So, the fact that that's what they've got, I utilize that to unpick and unpack the mysteries in this. I mentioned at the beginning, Holy Communion. Everybody who's a Christian will go to church on a Sunday, take Holy Communion, and they're going to give you bread and wine, and the bread is this wafer thing primarily, or they might even give you some unleavened bread, to line up with the traditional way that it was given. But, when you get into the mysteries of, the teachings of Christianity, that Holy Communion ritual, you can take that right back to ancient Egypt and other places that have Holy Communion, and the active ingredient that would allow you to have Holy Communion has been removed. So where now they're giving you a wafer, back in the days, or maybe not just back in the days, like right now, amongst those who know, they utilize, fungi, for example, as one of those Eucharists that would allow them to have Holy Communion. So for the most part, you can unpack each religion. Islam, for example, there's teachings, that Muhammad, delved into traditions that were dealing with, Pergamum Hamala, which is, comes from, the DMT family, and, a brew that they would concoct, similar to ayahuasca. So, and then Judaism, even the research amongst the clinical trial people, Max and all of these guys, some of their guys, come from the Jewish faith, and they've been exploring, the relationship between mushrooms and DMT and the Jewish faith and traditions. And, that's now becoming part of the narrative amongst even the clinical researchers, like you said, Rick Strassman and these guys. So, no matter what cultural tradition you deal with, drugs, sex, and rock and roll were the taboos, man. Because music is very key in, inspiring you to have altered states of consciousness, people go into trance and, have Holy Communion through dance. So, the dance, sex is one of the most powerfulest physical things we can do to access these unseen, powerful realms and places and spaces. So all these things were made a taboo by religion, and moving forward,
fucking A.
There's like the government reinforced those taboos, so this is why we don't know. This is why we're not interested. This is why we're scared, we're fearful, because it's been hundreds of years of like programming. But again, if you dive a bit deeper, go to source, you find it out. This is part and parcel of all the religions that we're talking about. It's part and parcel of, the governments, the power structures that are in place. They were inspired by older power structures, and the blueprints that they gathered, like the hierarchical system of the pyramid. The pyramid comes from like the mushroom and DMT world. Pyramids, it makes it easier to reinforce or to understand these blueprints. And although they've been distorted and used against the masses, it's actually the blueprint that you could use for your liberation.
So with that, this is something that I have been considering for a while. Just a little bit of a back history to what this started this thinking process. But apparently in China, for a long time, Qigong was outlawed among the citizens. You could not publicly practice Qigong because it was understood that Qigong was not just a meditation, but it's an access point to the spirit world. It's a way that you understand the technology of yourself better. You can do all the traveling and all the self-healing and all the things that we're touching on here. And in the 80s, I think it was, there was kind of such a public health crisis in China. The system was being overwhelmed by sickness. And so there was a government initiative to encourage people to start using Qigong to take care of their own health. Well, by 2000, I think, or in the 2000s, apparently it became a threat again because people were gaining access to their power. And as we have started exploring with psychedelics, and we're, mainly looking at it from this mental health perspective, I have been curious, and sometimes I just want to talk about this stuff publicly. I don't know if I'm putting a target on my back, or what. But if you don't want to answer, feel free to say you don't want to answer. But I do question with this current renaissance in psychedelics, if we could find ourselves at a point again where the people become so empowered and so capable of communicating with the unseen world, this access that we've been denied, if we're getting a little too eager in thinking that psychedelics will soon be, just accessible to the masses into the forever future.
Well, for me, I've got to say, that I say always all the time, it's like, it is what it is, and to get in where you fit. So, and I say that to say that there's, I don't see those who, let's say, are suppressing this information as, bad, evil, like it's like, because I say that to say in Africa, there's a saying that we say where it's like a secret is a secret is a secret, and, it's not everything is for everybody, and you've got to get in where you fit. That's what I'm saying. So we don't need every Tom, Dick and Harry, that's raised in a certain way, environment, who's naive, uneducated, just jumping in and being advocates, and, putting it out there in that way, because that's going to create kind of like an unbalance. It's like we need dark to balance out the light and vice versa. We need this, like the matrix that we live in, the universe that we live in, there's the good guys and the bad guys. That's what I learned from the Matrix. That's what I've also learned from ancient Egypt mythos, the tug of war between Horus and Set, this infinite war, this infinite battle that takes place that actually just keeps this thing going. That's what actually going. It's not everybody becoming enlightened and everybody is now good. And it's like, we've kind of missed the point also, from my understanding, from my experience with it. So it's like, this is what makes this fun, that you've got, the dark evil. I like the bad characters in the movies as well, and what is that for? What does that do? This is how I feel about it. Like, I'm using loads of metaphors, but hopefully, you get the gist of where I'm coming from. I feel it like football, soccer, as American folk call it. I've learned over the years, but we call it football, because we play with our feet and we kick the ball with our feet. But, if we was to be having a match, I've got my opposition, I've got our opposition. We're playing a match, and week in, week out, our opposing team, we're playing the same team, and they're just kicking our asses. They're just beating us every week. Every week we're losing 3-0, 4-0, 5-0. We might score a goal every now and then, but they're always beating us. from our perspective, are we to tell those guys to not play as well? Don't play as good as you're playing. Take it easy. Take it easy on us. Don't play as good as you played last week. Or is it for us to just raise our game and get our skills together and whatever it may be, And that's the understanding that I know that Horace and Set came to. That's the understanding that Mr. Smith and Neo came to, that you can actually inspire me to become a better version of myself and do what I've got to do better. Where I fit in, I'm going to do a better job and vice versa. So for me, my job is just to do me the best that I can. I want to do them the best that they can, wherever they fit in, And if you're my team, just like boxers, any opposition, it's like, oh, you're going to bring the best out of your opponent and vice versa. So I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go, but what I do know is that we're co-creating the future in our reality, and I feel I know what I've got to do. If I'm the goalkeeper, I've got to save the goals, man. I'm there to save the goals. If I'm playing up front, I'm trying to score the goals, and I just would like to inspire people through these experiences, like to know your position, man, know your place, know your position, and then play it to the best of your abilities.
Yes, and yes. That's one of the big challenges. I feel like talking with people as they work through their experiences. For me, it took a significantly long time to get to the point where there is no good and bad. And even still, like, I got to find myself checking myself, like wanting to, the other, and like this person's fighting against me. And it's just exactly like you say, this tussle, this game, this riding the waves, us, helping to move evolution along, helping to just keep this experience going. And yeah, it's so easy for us to get into this, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy, when everybody's just playing their part. Get in where you fit in. I love that.
And if we just bring it down specifically to like the psychedelic community, and as you mentioned, earlier, like with all the clinical trials and the therapeutic potential, and that's the narrative. That's what's being pushed when you watch all the documentaries and you do your first Googles, and that's not the place and space that Darren's in. That's not the interest that I have. But I really do appreciate that that's happening. Mm-hmm. Like, and I'm not going to be out there, saying, yeah, come on, let's do the trials and this, that, and the other. I believe there's some people out there that doing an amazing job at that. And I'm just going to not allow them, but, just be cool with them doing that, mm-hmm. Because what I've seen through them doing that, it has opened a place and space for me to have conversations with other people mm-hmm. who otherwise may not have seen or heard that type of information. And then we have a conversation and then they're like, yeah, I've heard that microdosing and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then it gives me the opportunity to share and educate. And then they get twofold, man. They get a nice balance. And there's some people that I would have been, I can tell you now that I just definitely wouldn't have engaged with and couldn't have shared my teachings, and others that I work with and, build with who also share this type of information. Like, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to share in the way that we are and do if it wasn't for the trials that are being done and opening up that narrative. But mm-hmm. I'm just here to share that that's not the be all and end all. It's not one-sided, and there's 360 degrees of this stuff, mm-hmm. Out there, and that's just a fraction of it. So let's just open up dialogues and narratives around other stuff.
Yeah. Oh man, this is something that I want to really sink in and take away from this conversation. I've kind of been getting, I get a little flared up, I have put myself in the position of being, the object of a fair amount of criticism because of how I operate and because of, how I talk, I guess sometimes. And I have had a real tendency to have that kind of like, oh, I gotta like defend myself from this thing. And really the thing to do with it is to play with it. It's like the energy that you bring into it. Is it a game or is it like a war? And I don't want to think about things in terms of a war. I came into psychedelics like feeling like we gotta fight this battle. We got to bring this medicine to the public. We got to bring back the ways of our ancestors, and had a very warrior-like mentality. And more as I see that, like, it's all guided. There is, in my experience, there is something behind the scenes that is moving all of this forward. And it's a delusion when I tell myself that I'm doing anything. So just to be in the flow and mixing in it. And when somebody's coming at me with any kind of attack, to laugh it off. I had someone recently suggest that I was discrediting the psychedelic movement because I make videos that are playful about mushrooms and they're not like super serious. And this was someone that was really highly involved in the the movement here in the United States, and I kind of immediately took defense, like wanted to double down, like, no, I'm gonna fucking fight back with play. But it's like to take this concept of the fight out of it and instead look at it like a play or a drama or a soccer match or a football match or however you want to call it.
That's the purpose of the Joker archetype, the jester. That's what they bring to the fold. When there's two people fighting or arguing, the Joker comes in and makes you both look like fools. Like that's the idea around it. Like that's what theater and drama, is spawned out of. It's always, the kind of good versus evil. And, generally, we watch the movies and good wins. So we're all trying to, fight this war, this battle. But, I'm sitting there saying all of this at the same time. Yeah, I struggle with it too. It's not like I sit there and I'm in, uni and the game all the time. I have my challenges. I have my moments where I'm in a warlike mentality, And again, I think it's 360 degrees. So there's a space for that. There is a space for that, but it doesn't need to end in bloodshed, death, and like where it can lead to, you just need to learn how to direct that energy. And I've just learned over the years how to direct that energy better. And that's like create more stuff, put more stuff out there, and the more that it's received in the way that, many a times I wanted to throw the towel in because I'm thinking, people don't want to hear this, they're not interested in this stuff. But then, like you said, I realized, I'm supported by this kind of unseen, not really knowing that there's just something pushing this and propelling me and making it happen, and I've just got to play my part, whatever that is. Just add a brick a day. That's what I'll say. Just add one brick a day. We're building something, and if everybody's got a brick and can bring their brick and build it, eventually we'll see what we're building. But for the most part, I always say, for all the, if this unseen thing that's pushing us, just know that I always just say this: there's more ancestors than there are people living in Britain. So, like, if it's the battle with the unseen world, they're gonna win. We're outnumbered. So, like, I want to find out and understand what's going on over there, and ideally we bring back some stuff over here, and then we can have that dance, that game, that play. And then sometimes it's war. But like, Kalindi would always highlight, in some of the early martial art traditions, they speak of, the entheogenic or the psychedelic wars where, they would be taking psychedelics and not fighting physically. They'd be fighting in these martial art realms. That's where the fight would actually take place. And you come back down, just like in the Matrix, when Neo learns all of his, martial art techniques and he's fighting with Morpheus. And then they're just in the room with the, with their headphones and whatever else that they've got on. It's like, this body, this human body, is just that. It's the headphones, it's the VR set, that we've got all the technology inside of us to be able to do those things. And then after we have those entheogenic battles, we can come back and no blood is shed, and we can, know that, they won, we lost, vice versa. And, whatever decision or outcome would have come out of that, we go with. So, yeah.
Wow. Oh, man, that's bringing back some very powerful experiences of that kind of back and forth in that ethereal realm, and really helping me to integrate some of those experiences. It's so amazing how conversations that you have 5, 10, 15 years after an experience can come back to confirm an experience and really solidify that in your existence. So thank you for just bringing that in. That's such a real experience that I think I often get out of touch with, I spend so much of my time in psychedelic space being a physical support to others. And even, when I dose, it's the vast majority of the time I'm taking mushrooms so that I can be of a support to others and help see things and bring things to light and work with my technology. But it's been a long time since I've done that kind of regimented me go into that world and work on the programming, get in there. And sometimes, like you said, it's a fight. So what you brought something up earlier that kind of ties into this, that's a really important aspect of this conversation. And that is discerning out, I don't know if you use the word delusion. I think I use the word delusion, but your own bullshit, right? You kind of talked about how when you go internal and you're kind of having these experiences and trying to suss out what is an actual contact, an actual communication versus what is, our own psychobabble, for lack of a better word. And I'm really curious if you have any input on how you yourself kind of make those discernments. This is something that people ask me quite a bit, and I don't think I've ever talked to anyone who I felt like could answer that question as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer it to yours, but at the same time, I look at it, again, I've had these conversations like just the other day, and again, this is prior to psychedelics, like with the dream world, it's like, so are my dreams real? Are they, is that just, like some people say, it's just a byproduct of filtering out what's happened in the last 24 hours, like you get that. And then that is part of my dream experience. And then I have dreams that are very much more vivid, more profound, that I still remember to this day. And I may not even be able to remember the dream that I had last night. That comes and goes and filters out. And there's some dreams that are more impactful and just last the test of time, and that's how I apply it, me personally, to the psychedelic experience, man. Like, there's some things that have come through that make no sense whatsoever in the experience. And I've tried to work it out. And then I realized I can't work it out, and I'm not going to try and work it out, and just leave it alone. And just like you said, shared just now, and sometimes it could be weeks, months, years later, I'm like, oh shit, that was in a bloody mushroom experience, and that's what he was trying to tell me. And I might have thought it was nothing before.
Yes,
but actually, it was something, So I'm saying all that to say that I've learned, going back to my dream statement, is like, for me, everything is real, Eric, man. It's all real. It's like there is no and it's just how profound, how hard did it hit is going to determine how much I bring that back with me to Earth, back in the room. And am I still thinking about it? Or was it like some of the DMT experiences, like, wow, that was powerful, profound, but I can't even remember a little bit of it. It happened so, and I know something happened, but what happened, I don't know. And I can't bring that back or integrate that, but was it real? It was real. It was just a really fast thing that happened. I couldn't make any sense of, but I still account that as something. It's not just the babble. Yeah. Because even sometimes my dreams, I thought it was just the babble, it was just this. But as I learned to journal and write things down, as I said, sometimes I can come back to it weeks, months, or even years later, and that little bit of babble was something. And I realized everything is everything. So for me, I just take with me just like really what hits home. As I said, like dreams, some of them are profound. I wake up, I can remember everything from beginning to end. And to me, that's an obvious sign that I'm meant to work with this. This is something to work with because it's so clear and on point and concise. And I can go back to it and unpack it, and lay it out in whichever way that I need to. And whether it's something I need to do physically, whether it's a conversation I need to have, whether it's just saying, bro, you got to get up tomorrow and do your running. You've been slacking on your, right? It could be like there's certain messages that come through and it'd be like, yeah, you're right. And is that my subconscious? Is that a divine entity? I don't know, but I've got the message. Some messages come through loud and bloody clear. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I play around with it. I used to get very serious and it could be confusing and I made it hard for myself in some cases. So I've learned just
that seriousness, that over intellectualizing it, really trying to decipher and understand rather than just kind of being in this loose play of like, okay, yeah, I experienced that. That was interesting. Let's see where it goes, how this continues to unfold. That was a beautiful answer to that question. And I think it's really valuable that you keep referring to the dream state and comparing that to the psychedelic state, because they are so similar and seems like, well, you meet ancestors in your dreams. You have foresight in your dreams. You have those same things within the psychedelic experience. So that comparison is really, really, really valuable.
Yeah, well, for me, that was the space, like prior to psychedelics, and I'm still in that space. We're always in that space, but I was heavy, researching it, checking it out, doing various practices, from childhood, having experiences and knowing that it's consistent. I met my first ancestors in my dreams. I met my first anthropomorphic forms in my dreams. All these things that I experienced in the psychedelic realm. It's like I did experiences in the dream world, but it definitely wasn't as potent, as vivid, as, on point as these psychedelic experiences have been. But like I said, I take it, as we say, with a pinch of salt. I don't take everything that I receive from the psychedelic experience or the dream world as gospel. I put it to the test, I'll challenge it, or sometimes I just leave it alone. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. So what are your thoughts on aliens? I know it sounds a little off left field, but it's not in my realm anyway. What are your thoughts on those entities and how they relate to psychedelic dream space, if any thoughts?
So yeah, well, according to my ancestors and the people that talk and share this information prior to me, they say that we are ancestors. We're just an extension of this alien extraterrestrial project. I know that mushrooms are aliens. I know that their origins are pre-Earth. Are non-earthly. Extra, more than Earth. So if we take away all the Hollywood babble, away from what extraterrestrials and aliens are, we definitely come from, or made up from, even physically, from alien material, extraterrestrial material, the water, the life forces, the bacterias and the spores that kickstarted life on Earth are alien, so it's not too far-fetched, when we kind of break it down. And then when you get into mythology, which I'm into, mythologies are giving you these kind of otherworldly, other places that these beings that were non-earthly who have come to Earth or created Earth, And then I mentioned at the beginning the first people, the so-called Pygmy people, the Bantu people, the Zulu people, all these people that I've checked out, on the African continent just alone, talk about having unearthly origins. The Zulu talk about being on Mars before they arrived on Earth. These are like common dialogue, the common narrative amongst all indigenous people. That's what, the Americas, Central Americas, Asias, they talk, I'm here, I've got artwork by, a Japanese painter, and we bounce around talking about the dogu, D-O-G-U. These are your pre-human, humanoid forms that, in Japanese mythology that suggested that, that came and, brought a contribution to planet Earth, basically, interacted into humans. So where and how do these interactions take place? Me personally, I'm not convinced just yet that there are these metal ships flying above our, Earth and zapping up cows and zapping up, human doing tests and stuff on us. After psychedelics, though, I was like, I see where a lot of the myths and experiences and testimonies of people can be tied into altered states of consciousness, and this is a place and space where we could interact with these entities or aliens, as some people refer to them, definitely in these places and spaces they happen, through dreams and meditation and psychedelics. So I'm more, if you're asking Darren, I lean more towards that as my solid space and place for where you're going to meet aliens. And like would say, taking mushrooms and not expecting to see these alien or entities and stuff like that is like going in the ocean and not expecting to encounter fish. From where they hang out, this is where they are. Stuff, whether it's salvia, DMT, they're over there, man. Real or not, call it real or not, this is where they hang out for sure. Sometimes they're in the room with you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I mean, I asked because it's just becoming a more prevalent part of my experiences with and without mushrooms. It's becoming something that is more widely reported. Even the United States government is holding meetings in Congress and are saying, there have been recovered ships and all this kind of stuff. And for it to be in the same time frame that we're having this kind of explosion of psychedelic access around the world, or at least access to information about psychedelics, and they are such part and parcel of the experience, I want to stay curious as to, what's the connection, what, if anything, is going on. And it feels like the psychedelic space is a place to be having these conversations, because a lot of us can talk about having these internal experiences.
Yeah, well, it's funny. When I was in the States the last time around, I was in LA at the UFO extraterrestrial conference in
Oh,
LA.
really? Okay.
Yeah, I got an invitation there to share about, psychedelics, because the UFO community, is saying, connections with psychedelics, and let's bring these two worlds together because they are synchronized. They have a symbiotic relationship, as we say, as above, so below, as within, so without. So if Darren's saying that he leans more towards those aliens existing inside of you and interface with them on your psychedelic experiences, I'm also aware that as above, so below, as within, so without. So I would never dismiss the fact that there could be some stuff flying around. There could be some stuff outside of yourself, and these things that they're finding, not all of them are kind of like how the movies have highlighted it. Because, like I said, some alien technologies, for example, come in the form of like a rock. Certain things that are in that rock,
or
are
a
alien.
mushroom.
There you go, man. There you go. An asteroid, a meteorite, all the things that and intelligences that it carries with it, that it brings it into this realm and spreads and distributes it around. Just like we use, the technology today, spreading stuff through the internet and sending out an email, and spamming people. This stuff happens in nature. That's how I see it. And when things and forces come into our environment, we pick up on those in different ways. I think the sun is alien, isn't it? It's, it's not extra, it's more than Earth. And we pick up information from this alien sun, Call it light, people around, we call it like light code information. There's information in the sun that comes down and plants get it and animals get it. And then we capture that information and we share it, through nutrients, through plants, through food. It's like, it's not as deep, and scary and Hollywood as, it's just like really, as I said, I won't say basic, but you can break it down, as I'm trying to, on a basic level, to understand that it doesn't seem too far fetched to me that there's aliens.
So this is part of the conversation as we feel like attempt to as a global culture move out of imperialism, move out of colonialism, because that was the whole guise of colonialism, is that the other is different from you, the other is a threat from you, the other has resources that we need to take. And this perspective around, I love that you can bring it even to the sun, right? Like, we do perceive of the sun as the other, and yet we absorb its energy and it feeds us. It's not other than us. And the more we can break down these barriers of the other, then obviously, we become one. And what we can, it's like I was talking the other day about the coming energy crisis. Like, what the fuck energy crisis? We're swimming in energy. It's everywhere, but we separate ourselves out and we make these little compartments of this is who these people and these things are, when it is, as we know, through psychedelics and through just transcendental experiences, that it is all one.
For sure. So yeah, I think that's what we need to look at. What I say is our common denominators. What's brought us together is the mushroom. That's our common denominator. And like others have different common denominators. And yeah, we're living in a time and space in the world where division, and being pitted against each other is what keeps, the powers that be able to really control us. Because whether it's a black or white thing, a gender thing, a religious thing, a political thing, that's the thing that's going to keep you distracted from going inside of yourself and kind of just discovering who you really are, and that you are connected with things. And you are a Christian, you are a Jew, you are Islamic, you are both masculine and feminine. All of these things psychedelics will tell you, man. It's like, oh shit, I've been battling myself. I've been fighting myself. And that's what the mystery really is. That why you have to have true sacred union is within yourself, because you're just fighting yourself.
Dude, I'm just laughing at myself right now, because even still, like, I find myself in these, every now and then, like, feeling like I've got to, defend myself or battle or whatever. And it's just like, I started, as you're talking, I'm thinking like how funny it is that we have discord in the psychedelic community, that, if any community should be aware of its unity, it should be the psychedelic community. But I contribute to that discord as well, because I see someone who criticizes me or whatever as other than me, and they're not. They're the same. They're just tossing me the ball. We are playing the game.
Yeah. Totally, man. And it reminds me of one of my favorite movies called The Game, with Michael Douglas and...
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mushroom movie, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, all these challenges and all the things he's going through is really just all to do with, with your ego, our ego, the collective consciousness that we're all in a tango with, man. We're all doing it in some shape, form or another. And it's just in our awareness of it that allows us to dance better, and I'm up for the challenge. I'm up, because I'm aware that, friction creates, new life, sparks things, and like we do need that. But, like I said, we don't need to like really be putting people down, stabbing, shooting, killing, in the name of our belief, our perspective, So yeah, I think that's, other than that, we should be having, balanced debates, because from those debates, from those dialogues, from those conversations, we're going to get ideas, we're going to be inspired, but yeah, man, as I said, I'm sitting there and I get caught up in the same realities as well, man. I'm not here, in my yin and yang mode, perfectly balanced. what are they talking about? Like, that's BS. But I'm pretty sure that someone says, yeah, he's saying that mushrooms are aliens and that we're mushrooms having a human experience. What kind of BS is that? And I really know. I don't even believe in that. I know about that. But, and I'm happy to have that dialogue, have that conversation now. Where before I might have been a bit more defensive. And I spoke about it the other day in another podcast interview, like just as far as I've matured enough, just within myself a bit more to where I've realized I'm really in no competition with anyone. I come from a competitive culture, competitive society, a competitive community, you know what I'm saying? And whether it was football, arcade games, debates in classroom, it was about, winning. That's what it was all about. And I definitely, one thing that we say being on this side of the pond is that Americans have got a better winning attitude than we have. We had that school of thought like, just participating is a good thing. Just you don't need to play to win. Just being a part of it is just a good experience. And we always knew that Americans, they play to win, and that's why they're winners, and that's why they're just good at everything. And it's that competitiveness that we all have in us, some more than others. Other cultures more than others, it's like, and you just kind of see how it plays out. But ultimately, it's like, yeah, man, it's not about just play for the sake of playing, and it's not like we've got to win and just step on everybody's heads, to win. It's like just finding that middle balance killer. I do want to win. I want to make sure like my team do the best, but I'm not going to do it in ways that like I said are detrimental to other people, and more importantly yourself. If it's giving you mental health, if it's giving you physical issues, like you've got to be honest with yourself. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I realized, that I was carrying around certain luggage that didn't serve me well because I was mad at the world, I was mad at the system, mad at certain things, and I've been that guy. I was that guy. I am that guy. He's not left. You know what I'm saying? I just know how to manage him better. How to manage him better.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So, man, there's so much good stuff in this episode. So much good stuff here. Can you talk a little bit about this, the mushroom having a human experience? Because I have experienced this as well. There is an interesting, sometimes this point where when I take mushrooms, it's like, I don't know how to put it into words. Like I'm remembering, it's becoming very aware to me that this is a symbiosis, that I am not taking mushrooms, that the mushrooms are taking me.
Yeah, you got it, man. I say that. I always say, you're a mushroom having a human experience, and that you're just a big piece of shit. And both of those are complementary. Please do not be offended. And then when you know that psilocybin mushrooms have got this symbiotic relationship with shit as well, then you realize that is the relationship that I feel we're meant to have ultimately. It's like the first relationship, the first, out of all the technologies that we've had. So we're very much connected to it. And the reason why I say if we go back to just being big pieces of shit, because we say things like we come from the soil, we go back to the soil, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, our physical matter, is made from those elements that come from the soil. It's the same elements or nutrients that go into the plants that allow us to breathe, the same plants that we eat that allow us to become who we are in growing and developing. So we're very much connected to it all. And all of that was kickstarted by these mushrooms. They were the ones who created the soil in the first place. I'm saying for plants to evolve 500 plus million years later, so this is a mushroom planet, whether we know it or not, like it or not. The mycelium has embedded its way all the way through the earth, and the matter that we refer to as organic matter is inside of us. We can't get away from it, where we know it, whether we know it or not, love it or not, like it or not. We're connected to this extension of this extraterrestrial project that started with these aliens who arrived on their spaceships, which were UFOs, as some people refer to them, or IFOs, because we identified that they were asteroids and comets and stuff that had these spore passengers, man, and this alien technology that eventually made its way to Earth and has developed this existence that we're currently experiencing and still continues to hold space, still is facilitating, everything that's going on in it. And that's just what I'm trying to say scientifically, without getting too sciencey with it. But yeah, panspermia is the phenomenon, the scientific phenomenon that explains that from the alien perspective that I'm talking about, and then study soil science or composting, just to understand the role of, the breaking down of all life that has ever existed on Earth. You know it now, controls that, man. And it's mushrooms, man. It's all to do with mushrooms.
Yep.
They're the creators and they're the ones who end it all. They're the starters and the finishers. And I like to refer to them as Warren G and Nate Dogg. They're the regulators.
Makes sense.
Everything in between.
Man, I tell you what, just because you brought up Orangey and Nate Dogg, I had this mushroom trip years ago where, like, the end of the trip, I don't know how it happened. I think it was because it was the time when Snoop was going down to Jamaica and doing the whole thing there. And at the end of this mushroom trip, it was just like so certain to me that Snoop Dogg and I were going to be somehow collaborating. And for so long in this trip, I just kept hearing Snoop Dogg calling me. I would pick up the phone and it was Snoop. It's like, E, what's up? Like, Snoop. It just like was on repeat. That's one of those things that I'm still waiting to see if it was that the garbage, or was that something that's actually going to play out.
Yeah, man, just make sure it's in the journal or logged here and
for sure. Oh man, that is so beautifully said. Yeah, the experience of growing mushrooms, I had a pretty decent sized mushroom farm here in the States for a while. And, it just all comes back to the soil. Mushroom farmers are dirt makers. That's what I like to say. As a mushroom grower, I'm really just making soil. And even as a human being, this body is going to be soil. And so I want to be the best soil that I can be. And now you can take that metaphorically, you can take that literally, either way. Darren, man, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I'd like to save some more for later, another day down the road, perhaps. I always like to ask guests, because the show is Psilocybin Says, what does psilocybin say to you? If there was kind of a concise message that you could share with the listeners right now about that's a message from the mushroom, what might that be?
Don't try and work us out.
Don't what? Try and what?
Don't try and work us out.
Figure it out for my American friends there. Don't try and work us out. I like that.
That's one thing it tells me. Like when I'm, like you said, when I've got that mind, I'm trying to make it. It's like, Darren, you really think you're going to work us out? You start here trying to work us out. All right, cool. And then it throws something at me, and I get discombobulated.
That is.
So I put it out to all the researchers, all the scientists, and everybody else. Like you said, there's something behind this. Like we say, we're doing stuff, but like you said, it's doing stuff to us. Mm-hmm. And whether that's the mushroom, I used to say that I had that saying in the plant community because I have this food growing background, and they used to say the same thing: are we using the plants, or are the plants using us? Mm-hmm. So it's like, with that said, we don't need to work it out. It's using us, we're using it, and we just need to have this relationship, this organic relationship, and don't try to be too let's get our hands on it, let's control this, let's synthesize it, let's do whatever, but hey, everyone's going to do what they're going to do. But it just always reminds me, don't try and work us out.
Don't try and work it out.
Joy, yeah.
I love it. Oh man, thank you so much for your time, Darren. Thank you so much for your work that you're doing. You're spreading a wealth of information out there. I'll share links to your social media and everything so that folks want to follow you. Is there anything coming up soon that you'd like to share with the audience? Got any events coming up?
Yeah, man, I've got a series of events coming up, in-person ones, in the UK, around Europe and stuff like that. And I know people that might be watching this might be from all different parts in the world and be like, well, I can't actually get to London or Manchester or Scotland or wherever you may be. So how about you go to my website, darrenlebaron.com, and you'll be able to get my new upcoming webinar series, man, that I'm about to launch at the end of this month. So I'm not sure when this comes up, but October 31st is the release date. And It's called Psychedelic in Africa, the Untold Story, which is an extension of the initial research that I started to do, as well as the first presentation that I put together, which was a 30-minute presentation initially that went on to become a 90-minute presentation, which is now a 6, 7, 8 hour plus series that will be online available, where all the type of stuff that I've been sharing with you today, as far as, the ancient usages of it, the first people to, who are those people, where do you find them, how do they use it? And I'll bring you right through to the here and now, man, and looking at some of the research being done, in particular, that happens in the Americas, in the diaspora, all over the place. So that's available on my website, DarrenLeBaron.com, Psychedelics in Africa, the Untold Story, the new webinar series.
Oh man, that is super exciting. And, as we move forward in this renaissance, as it's being called, it seems more and more important that we get that backstory. The stuff that's happening with the research and all, love it. Thank you. Keep doing that great work. we don't really need it actually, because we know from the historical record that this is part of who we are. Still respect it. We all have, there is that mind that wants to continue to work it out. And, we can play that game. But a big part of the game also is knowing what happened in the past as best we can. So thank you sincerely. Thank you for bringing that to light, especially out of Africa. There's a huge conversation that could be had about what Africa has brought to this world and will bring to this world. I am firmly convinced that Africa is our past and our future. So, that you're diving into the psychedelic world of Africa and bringing that out to the masses is hugely important. Have you ever seen in Ethiopia? I'm sure the Lalibela temples and Lalibela, the crosses that are buried under the ground. Was usually. Have you ever seen? There's a picture that I have in my Facebook, whatever catalog of pictures that I found once of some of the windows in the temples of Lalibela, and the tops of them are perfect cubensis. There's a little short stem and then that bell-shaped top with the nipple. I mean, it is an absolute perfect cubensis. If you've not seen that picture, I'll be happy to share it with you. I think that it's really, it's powerful. You know the story of Lalibela and all those interconnected temples. It's fucking fat. That's a.
There's more that you could share with me, man. But I'm the Coptic churches, and these were mushroom churches. Some of the teachings that I've got from, the resources that I've got talk about the early churches being mushroom churches as well, that you find in Ethiopia East and as well as over.
Well, I mean, even the Ark of the Covenant, the story of manna going in the Ark of the Covenant, and I believe strongly, I think it's absolutely provable through the etymology, through the written history, that manna was the puffball mushroom, that it was an edible loaf of bread, puffball mushroom that dried in the dew or dried in the sun and came up with the dew, and all the prescriptions that went with keeping it so that it wouldn't breed worms and stink, and that manna was one of the only things that was put in the Ark of the Covenant, which is reportedly still exists in Aksum, Ethiopia. So there's an incredible history there that maybe we can talk more about one day. I should probably take your webinar and get a little more informed on this 6 or 7 hours. This is just a teaser on the information that you will be offering in that webinar. So I'm really excited to help you spread that message.
Oh, man, appreciate that, Eric, man. And on your side as well, just keep up the good works, man. I see you. I know what you do, man. So just don't stop doing. Don't let your adversaries, throw you off. Just have that dance, man. Keep having that dance.
Yeah, that's how I want to keep looking at it. Thank you for that reminder, Darren. And I look forward to talking with you again.
All right, peace.
Peace, brother.